time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
All right. As Ben said that PTR, we're a market research firm. We've been doing value chain analysis of several companies in electrical sector in the last 10 years. And data is something that we have provided to a lot of companies to make their decisions. And I wanted to talk about a few learnings that we have had in the last few years with regards to how having the complete holistic overview of value chain of a company, especially in electrical sector, can change your perspective. Because when we can, especially in electrical sector, when we can see emissions, that's where we tend to focus more. Whereas rest of the value chain where there might be bigger problems to solve, those get ignored oftentimes. So it kind of leads us into this tunnel vision and just focus on some of the areas where everybody has a lot of understanding. And I'll give you some examples from studies that we have conducted in the recent past. Another thing, we work a lot with electrical utilities, and historically this sector has been very slow moving in terms of adopting new technologies. And when you tend to focus just on decarbonization, that does not get the ball rolling in many cases. So you have to focus on areas beyond just decarbonization and focus on any economic benefits that they might get from getting a new technology in the system. And lastly, embracing technology setbacks. This is something that we think that is also important. There will be many cases where physics will not be on your side. Laws of thermodynamics, they cannot be broken. So the other day there was an amazing debate on the main stage about CCS, that how carbon cap is it something that's viable or not. So I think these kind of debates are super important for us to actually see that which technologies are really going to help us decarbonize the electrical sector. As I said, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. We all know about greenhouse gas emissions, but of course not all greenhouse gases are created equal. They have different impact on the environment. I don't know if you know about this greenhouse gas called sulfur hexafluoride, SF6. And it is one of the most potent greenhouse gases that impact the environment. And in fact, it is 32 or 23,000 times more potent than CO2. So in other words, one molecule of SF6 is 23,500 times more potent than CO2. And it exists, it stays in the environment for a much, much longer time. You can see the lifespan of SF6 in the environment. And in our studies, we found out that SF6 was being used in electrical equipment. It's an inert gas, but it has one amazing property, which is that it helps protect the electrical equipment. It's 5 times heavier than normal air, so that's what makes it really interesting in electrical apparatus, electrical equipment. And until this article got published in BBC, the dirty secret of electrical industry, not a lot of people knew about this. And the biggest application of SF6-based equipment, electrical equipment, was wind turbines. So hence, the idea of looking at the entire value chain, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of wind turbines, and within them, you have electrical apparatus using sulfur hexafluoride. So this article did make a big impact, actually. And there were already some efforts to put a ban on SF6. It was already gradually being phased out. There were other applications. We did a study back in 2018, and even though it was being phased out from electrical equipment, the year-on-year increase of SF6 leakage was increasing. And it was very perplexing for everybody that why is that the case? And it turns out that even though the use of SF6 was discontinued in soundproof glass many years ago, all the installed soundproof glass still had leakage of SF6. So even though the usage was banned many, many years ago, you still had a lot of cases where SF6 was being released in the environment from those installations because they still existed. So new regulations had to put in. Good thing that this resulted in a lot of discussions at EU level, and basically the use of SF6 has been now is going to be banned in the next few years. And this also resulted in many companies introducing new technologies, which are kind of alternatives to SF6, much more greener solutions, and there was a lot of retaliation. There was a lot of pushback because many big companies, their entire businesses were designed around usage of SF6 in electrical apparatus. So it took a lot of back and forth. There were some cases where some loopholes were left as well in the regulation, but then after a lot of debates, and especially because of the existence of alternative devices, that because the initial argument was there are no alternatives out there, so SF6 will still be used in wind turbines. There's no other way around it. But then a lot of alternatives. Basically, usage of pressurized nitrogen was introduced along with some other inert gases with no impact on the environment, so no global warming potential. And basically, the latest regulation, which went into force last month, that will enforce all the users, which is electrical utilities, and also the manufacturers, to not manufacture as well as not use electrical apparatus which has any gas, let alone SF6, with a certain global warming potential. So this is an amazing win for the industry, and it's going to have much longer lasting impact on the industry. Another important aspect that I wanted to focus on was focus beyond decarbonization and highlighting, especially if there are any positive impacts with regards to overall economics of a system. That obviously gets the ball rolling very quickly. And same example, usage of sulfur hexafluoride based equipment versus the alternatives. The initial pushback from any user or any electrical utility is that it is 20 to 30 times more expensive than the alternative. Why would an electrical utility, which I said is one of the most slow moving industries, it's very difficult to get them to adopt new technologies. Why would they pay 25% extra, especially there is no regulation out there? Why would they go for an upfront higher cost? And one of the big things that we discovered was there is many other areas where one can save a lot of money. For example, with SF6, you have to have trained staff. For example, if you're retiring a piece of equipment, you cannot just rip it out and then put new equipment in because it has this extremely potent greenhouse gas filled into that equipment. So you need very trained staff. Oftentimes, electrical utilities had to get contracts with companies who could, go to the facility, recuperate all the gas from within the equipment, and that costed money. And and you have to have then trained staff within the organization as well. You have to have planned maintenance schedules with SF6 based equipment. So that resulted in a lot of higher costs. So everybody initially with alternative solutions was focused on capex, whereas OPEX was not a big topic at all for them. But when you start highlighting these benefits, it becomes much easier to convince somebody that, hey, this is something which is good for the organization in the longer run. I've been in some discussions where there are other electrical equipments where looking at the entire value chain is also important. Electrical transformers, which we see everywhere in the world, that's a big example. 40% of the raw material that goes into that equipment is steel, and steel we know that its production is has a big impact on the environment. Even now, even then we are talking about hydrogen as a potential source. Still, it's one of the biggest source of CO2 emissions. And I've been in those discussions where talking about that, hey, the total impact of making a big transformer is huge because it uses steel. People would say, no, I don't see any smoke coming out of it. Why do you say that this has a negative impact on the environment? Then you have to convince now 40% of the raw material that it uses is electrical steel, um, which is extremely bad for the environment, given the current processes through which this electrical steel is being produced. But then, if you opt for better alternatives, not only you are going to decarbonize the entire value chain of production of transformers, but then in the longer run, it has higher efficiencies. And within electrical sector, anything with higher efficiency means that you're going to save money because every electron, so to speak, is going to pass through that equipment, and higher efficiency in the longer run throughout the life cycle of that equipment is going to save money for you. But usually that does not become the first point of discussion, and hence the users, unless there is a regulation that is going to enforce them to use that kind of equipment, they won't go for it. So this is a good example that on the left hand side you see that even though the upfront cost, so if you see the first row here, and the overall lifetime spendings combined, it's higher than SF6 free alternatives. Even though the initial purchase price of RMU, which is a type of equipment, is higher, which is 3 million, whereas the maintenance cost is very low because you do not have to have trained staff. There are no regulations which say that you have to have 2 maintenance cycles in a year. So over the course of time, you will end up saving money. So yeah, that's all from my side. These three elements, I think, they definitely can be applied on sectors beyond electrical. Because as I said, within electrical sector, anything which has clear, you can see the emissions, hence that becomes the focus. You kind of become tunnel vision. You do not tend to focus on the entire value chain. I think this is also applicable on many other sectors where, as humans, where we can see that, hey, this is impacting the environment, we tend to focus just on that, whereas could be some other areas where, the higher impact might be happening, negative impact might be happening onto the environment. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
It's time to wake up.